post-election fallout continues as the ghouls that remain in the Liberal Party stumble around in the wasteland of their own creation, barely clinging on to survival. With Peter Dutton gone, the leftovers started jostling for the leadership gig, and I have to say the field was not exactly brimming with talent. Angus Taylor and Susan Ley have emerged as frontrunners, leaving the Liberal Party with a real Sophie's choice. Then, to add some additional spice to the contest, Jacinta Price thought that a couple of days after the Coalition's massive election loss was the perfect time to put her personal ambition before all else and defect to the Liberal Party when she saw an opportunity to run as Angus Taylor's deputy. You'd think that both Taylor and Price might have taken some time to reflect on the roles they played in the Coalition's defeat, but
make Australia great again.
There's nothing quite like opportunism. Some of her Coalition colleagues haven't been shy about calling Price out either.
Jacinta's done enormous damage to her reputation. I've had been inundated with feedback from people from the Northern Territory, very upset. She hasn't spoken to members up there who elected her, hasn't spoken to the party, hasn't spoken to her colleagues in Canberra about this. And it was only a week ago she was elected as a member, as a senator. She's actually not yet elected, I haven't finished counting, but she's going to be elected as a senator sitting in the Nationals Party room. That's what she stood at the election for. And I don't know, Shari, how you can go to the people one week and say, I'm going to represent this party in the nation's parliament, and then the very next week turn around and say, oh, actually, I've changed my mind, I'm going to go to a different side. It's like changing teams on the football field after the whistle has blown. It's not the sort of behaviour I think Australians appreciate. And it's the kind of thing that Lydia Thorpe did. How is what Jacinta's doing any different from what Lydia did?
To me, it feels like turning up to an RSL club with a membership form and then saying, by the way, I'm going to run for the board and I want to be president. You know, it just wouldn't work that way. I think Angus Taylor has insulted not only every Liberal woman, but every Liberal Party member.
As long as Gina's happy, I guess. Then there have been allegations from within the Liberal Party itself that Angus Taylor was plotting his leadership tilt before election day.
What I'm very concerned about is that it now seems that the Liberal Party was actively recruiting Senator Nampijinpa Price 5 days out from an election. That is not the behaviour of partners, of trusted partners.
Clearly, people of the so-called right were already in the stages of a coup against Peter Dutton before he had even lost his seat. There was, I don't know if you've seen them or your viewers have seen them, but reports of a Liberal MP getting a phone call from a contender's wife trying to garner support for him long before the election was even over, and I'm talking a couple of weeks before the election day.
Sounds like happy families. But don't be fooled into thinking that rank opportunism and personal ambition are just a plague on the Coalition. If you're going to take a crack at Price, it'd be a touch hypocritical not to take a look at the actions of Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, who appears to have jumped at the chance to install a couple more factional allies to the front bench to shore up support for that inevitable run at the top job he's no doubt plotting. Mark Dreyfus lost his job, which, given his handling of the National Anti-Corruption Commission and treatment of whistleblowers, I wouldn't personally view as being a big loss. But the guy that's been elevated to the front bench in his place, well, it sounds like his appointment has more to do with being, as The Age put it, a factional head kicker than it does based on merit. Ed Husick was also shown the door, and he seemed to indicate he thought it was partly the result of the position he'd taken on Gaza. That position is one he may be a little more freely able to express publicly now without fear of losing his front bench position. Regardless, Husick wasn't mincing his words when it came to Richard Marles.
Look, the difficult issue here is that we've had sort of barefaced ambition and a Deputy Prime Minister wield a factional club to reshape the ministry. I think when people look at a Deputy Prime Minister, they expect to see a statesman, not a factional assassin.
There's some strong words. You're saying Richard Marles has put his own ambition to boost his numbers ahead of the good of the party and the government.
Well, I think a lot of people would draw that conclusion.
This whole drama highlighted to the country that when it comes to Labor and the dishing out of ministries, it's got very little to do with merit and everything to do with numbers. In terms of spicy election contests, I think this time around the only seat that could compete with Kooyong on the Scoville scale was Goldstein. Tim Wilson lost the safe Liberal seat in 2022 to independent Zoe Daniel. He didn't really take it too well. Cut to 2025, and apparently, as Tim Wilson would tell it, he'd been unemployed for years, paying for the campaign off his credit card. As far as his employment status goes, his LinkedIn tells a slightly different story, but make of that what you will. In his victory lap, Wilson took a swipe at, I'm guessing, Climate 200, saying, "We did not have massive cheques written to us by entities based in Sydney who tried to treat the community like it was an acquisition in a trust fund," which is both a curious and laughable thing to say, given that Tim Wilson himself is reported to have been rattling the can around Sydney to collect donations from rich Sydney-siders ahead of the election, whilst at the same time being the beneficiary of well-funded third-party outfits like Advance and Better Australia, who flooded the zone with shit throughout the campaign. Incredible self-reflection from Tim, but probably a little unfair to expect any more from a guy who was reported to have been banned from editing his own Wikipedia entry. It's fair to say that millions of dollars were poured into Goldstein during the campaign. The why and how Wilson got over the line here will no doubt be analysed to death, but it likely comes down partly to the redrawing of electoral boundaries and partly down to Wilson courting the Jewish vote, whilst attack ads and anonymous letters accusing Zoe Daniel of anti-Semitism ran at the same time in an electorate that's home to one of the largest Jewish populations in the country. As of recording this, Kooyong's still on the knife's edge, but you'd think Monique Ryan will take the chocolates now. But if this election's taught us anything, it's not to count your chickens before they hatch, not with the price of eggs at the moment. One of the other big takeaways from Kooyong and Goldstein this election was how many resources the Liberal Party threw at attempting to regain those seats. We'll have to wait for Liberal disclosures for what they're worth, but I have to think that a lot of the money thrown at those two electorates came at the expense of other seats, which then contributed to the overall coalition loss. A lot was made of the Greens' failure to retain most of their lower house seats, and Advance have been running a victory lap there, as have the rusted-on Labor faithful. To which I'd be saying, if you find yourself celebrating alongside Advance, there's a better than average chance you've found yourself on the wrong side. I do find the whole Labor versus Greens war bizarre. I find it even more bizarre that while the PM could find some kind words for Dutton, he had nothing but bile for the Greens. Kind of weird. His comments suggesting that part of the reason why Max Chandler Mather didn't retain his seat was the result of the Greens holding up public housing was even more bizarre. I'd love to know what legislation the Greens held up last term that was supposed to build public housing, because it sure as hell wasn't the HAF. So where does this leave us? At the end of the day, nothing's really changed. We've got a Labor majority in the lower house, and Labor will have to work with either the Greens or the coalition to get things through the Senate. Yeah, Labor can claim a thumping win with 90 plus seats in the lower house, but it's also a reality that they've done so while receiving a little over a third of first preference vote. Labor can talk up a mandate because that's what governments love to do, but with a thumping win comes expectation. Expectation that you'll do something. Labor have a ton of political capital in the bank right now, but I reckon if they continue to spend it as nervously as they did their first term, then don't be at all surprised if they're punished at the ballot box next time around. When your own MPs are describing your previous term as timid,
We need to burn through the timidity that has shackled us in the first term.
the electorate is probably going to quickly run out of patience if you're just delivering more of the same. And as I wrap things up, I think it's important that we just take a brief moment out of our day just to offer our thoughts and prayers to Sky News.
The polls you're reading in the news are wrong when it comes to this federal election. Most national polls have been showing Labor ahead, and some have even pointed to majority government for Labor. But this is a fantasy. There's no question Peter Dutton is absolutely in the game.